Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we kick off our 2-week celebration of both Shark Week and the greatest shark movie of all time, and the second one that came after it, Jaws. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans we have. So warning, spoilers ahead, and I am happy to be back. Hello! All right, from Austin, we have Tony Salvaggio, the lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comic Psychon from Tokyo Pop and Clockworks from Humanoids. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy, and thank you for hosting for the past, 5 or 6 weeks.
Man, that was fun.
It was a blast to listen to. It was so cool to listen to you guys tear some of the Evil Dead movies to shreds, and you did such a great job, and you loved some of them, and I was just thrilled to be listening. All right. Also in Austin tonight is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man from Monsterverse Comics. Say hello, Drew.
Y'all all know what I do for a living.
And Drew was also with us for the past 5 weeks in Denver. I am your host, Jason Henderson, the writer of the new 3DS game, TMNT, which comes with the new movie that just came out. And finally, as always, joining us from Denver, color commentary from attorney Julie Guzman. Say hello.
I missed you boys. You did a great job without us, but I missed you.
Well, thank
awesome.
you. Thank
we missed you guys, too. It was fun, but we missed you as well.
The band is back together.
Exactly.
God, you know what I wouldn't give for a mystery machine, which is funny because when you think that...
Well, I think Drew has one. But...
Yeah, I know.
I
Drew
do.
Often records from a van.
You might have to fight the danger cakes for it, though.
That, yeah. If we have to rumble with an all-girl blues band, I think that would...
I don't know, man. They're pretty badass.
That's what he's saying.
No,
he thinks that we would lose.
I'm good and afraid.
I'm pretty sure we would. They once challenged a bunch of roller derby girls to a fight, so I think they could probably take us.
Well, it sounds to me like tonight, though, you are not recording from a van you've borrowed from a car.
No, I am in the Halloween Man office, actually, in our apartment, surrounded by a lot of comic book art. So
call that the Halloween cave.
Yes.
Okay, all right. But we are here to talk about Jaws. Okay, Jaws, so saith Wikipedia, is a 1975 American thriller film directed by Steven Spielberg and based on Peter Benchley's novel of the same name. The prototypical summer blockbuster, its release is regarded as a watershed moment in motion picture history. In this story, a giant, you have to take this as if you've never heard of this movie before, a giant man-eating great white shark attacks beachgoers on Amity Island, a fictional summer resort town, prompting the local police chief to hunt it with the help of a marine biologist and a professional shark hunter. The film stars Roy Scheider as police officer Martin Brody, Richard Dreyfuss as oceanographer Matt Hooper, Robert Shaw as shark hunter Quint, Murray Hamilton as the mayor of Amity Island, Lorraine Gary as Brody's wife Ellen, and it has a screenplay credited to Benchley, but also actor-writer Carl Gottlieb, who appears in the movie, and who did most of the rewrites and gave us most of the script that we have here, except for one amazing speech that comes at what we may as well call the midpoint, which is the Indianapolis speech. So we'll get to that. All right, let's do first impressions. We'll try to keep these short because, by gum, we got a lot to talk about in this movie. But I want to know, really, what kind of personal history you're bringing to Jaws, and what your memories of seeing this, and how you can fit that into a personal first impression is great. So let's go, Tony, Drew, Julia, and then I'll maybe say something. Tony, first impressions, Jaws.
I think, like most kids, actually I didn't get to see this until I was much, much older. I was young when it came out. My parents were definitely not going to have any of that. But it's kind of funny because even though if you're a kid who grew up around the time the movie came out, and maybe it's still the case now, but probably less so, like the theme for Jaws and the idea of dun, 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 like no matter if you'd seen it or not, you'd heard of this, and you'd seen it in commercials and TV spots and everything else. And so you still kind of knew Jaws. You didn't know how good it was. It was probably scarier in your head than it actually ends up being. But man, but I did know, since I could stay up late for whatever reason on Saturday nights, I knew the land shark from Saturday Night Live. So right. I knew the land shark more than I knew the actual movie. So for years and years and years, and I still every once in a while I'd use it if somebody's, if I'm at somebody's house that I know and they're like, "Who is it?" Bottlenose dolphin, But
and that was 1975. I should point out that the land shark gag was from the 1975 season of SNL.
I must have seen reruns then, because it was later when I remember it, but I don't know.
Oh, almost definitely. I mean, you probably did see the reruns, but it's just interesting to me that Jaws and Saturday Night Live hit the United States at the same time.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. All right, Monsieur Drew, first impressions, Jaws.
Well, this movie existed pretty much this movie came out in 1975, 74. So I was born in 1978. So this movie existed my entire life. I can't really remember the exact first time I saw it, but as long-term listeners of this podcast will know, I grew up around a lake, which obviously did not have great white sharks in it, but this movie was the the source of endless numbers of nightmares regarding going to the water and being gobbled up by some kind of sea monster. We actually just finished doing a bunch of all of the Evil Dead movies, and as much as I enjoy those movies, I actually think this movie is a little scarier. I'll get into why later, but this to me is not just a great monster movie and not just a great thriller, but this is just a great movie because it's not just wall-to-wall scares. They really take time to let you get to know the characters, and that's really, to me, what makes this a cut above the scores of imitators, and not just all these imitators, because this is like pretty much the blueprint for so many of our modern films. And I love this movie. I'm really glad to be discussing it. I'm really glad to be discussing it with a regular cast. This is going to be a great episode.
Very cool. Julia, Jaws, which you just saw. I don't know how many times you've seen it, but we just now saw it again.
Mhm. I don't know how many times I've seen it either. I grew up with it, but it did not exist when I was born. But that's another story. I grew up with it. I grew up in Houston, Texas, so I got to go to Galveston quite often, and we went to Mexico a lot. So, yeah, I was a little freaked out. I still am. It may partly be because of this movie that I do not enjoy oceans that much. I prefer lakes. Huh?
We would go to Matagorda on the coast of Texas, and it was definitely like I said, even if you didn't quite know the movie, it was scary enough that if you saw a fin, you were getting the heck out the water. So
the interesting
if I saw a
thing
fin,
is,
I would get the heck out of the water.
Well, sure, of course. Yeah, no, you don't want to. Yeah, well, I mean, even dolphins, you don't know for sure. You're like, is that?
Exactly.
I don't know dolphin fins that well. But I've read that Peter eventually says that if he had known what sharks were actually like, he would never have written the book, because they're nothing, of course, like that. They're not these like man-eating aggressive things that just want to. I mean, they might take a bite out of you to see what you taste like, but then they're kind of like meh. But anyway, it's still terrifying, and it's terrifying not just because then there's Piranha, which was probably one of the scariest movies I ever saw, and there's even just jellyfish, which are very common in Galveston. I just don't like the ocean that much, but I like looking at it, and I like walking on the beach, but not so much with the swimming, and definitely not with the diving. But anyway, great movie. The funny thing is that Tony was saying everybody knows the score, but actually I think we know it all. Most of us know it a little bit wrong, because whenever I watch them, it's like that's not actually how I remember it going when I sing it. Like when I'm just going around, just going dun dun, it's like that's not actually how it is.
Well,
but
I think it's
because
it's
still very familiar.
Funny thing. I don't know if we should wait to do the score, but I think it's because so so many commercials and things we saw when we were younger. They don't have the rights. They don't have the rights to do it. So they're all their own versions. So whichever version that you've heard that apes it, that's kind of the version you remember. Right. Because it's such a. I mean, that's part of the phenomena. It is a cultural phenomena.
Absolutely.
And because of that, you end up with all of these like slightly off-kilter versions of that riff. That people had to do because, like, well, we aren't going to pay the rights, and this is close enough. We'll do that. And so I bet there's very few people who do it exactly as it's in the movie anymore. Anyway, it's just kind of gotten filtered into like the beat and you mostly know the notes, and then it's from there. It's like all bets are off.
Right.
Well, I mean, when you're watching the movie, actually, you remember that sort of shark stalking or the stalking shark song that gets played. That's just part of the thing. That most of the score is this very sort of Captain's Courageous.
Well, it's like it sounds like what it reminded me of. And there's the scene where they're pulling off in the boat to leave town. It reminds me of like Pete's Dragon. Like, it's got that kind of score, almost a Disney score in some parts. And,
very much an element of, hey, these three boys are going off on a grand adventure, and boy, it has that feel, too. I mean, that's
like
when,
the sea shanty kind of thing. And by the way, that's not a knock at all. It's like just how those, you're by the sea, here's music that evokes the sea, but it's also very, like, upbeat. And, in fact, there's one part where they're playing the really ominous Jaws theme over this like almost happy-go-lucky we're out at sea music, and it's this really weird like juxtaposition that I had really forgotten about until I was really watching it close today, and I was like, wow, that's so weird that it's like, all right, we're off to go to sea, da 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 da, and then da da, like it's so weird.
He uses these woodwinds all the time, going that da 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 da. It's very. I mean, boy, is it ever John Williams? It's John Williams before we knew what the heck that was going to be.
Sure.
You hear elements of Superman in here, in a sense. You kind of hear elements of E.T. A lot of. It's thrilling. It's really and this will stand in for my opening thoughts. This movie was absolutely a part of my childhood. I had the ideal Jaws game.
Yes. I hadn't seen the movie and I forgot about that. That was awesome.
The Jaws game was this thing where you had a model of the shark that was about the size of a shoebox, and he had a whole bunch of junk like tires and wheels and and rocking chairs and things in his mouth, and then you would use a little tweezer to like pull things out, and if you were the sucker who got the last thing out that caused his jaw to snap shut, you lost. And
by the way, it was a hook, and then eventually though, it becomes the game. If you have brothers, especially, it becomes the game of like, can you pull the stuff out with your hand? And like, which is not, the rubber band's not bad. I mean, it can't really snap you unless of course you also have brothers who will put both hands on it and slam it so that it feels like it's actually like the shark on your hand. Not that that ever happened. Gabe and Heath.
I'm sorry. I'm glad that you saved yourself from that.
No, it was. I mean, it's fun. Like those are good memories. Like the Jaws game was really cool.
Jaws was where
you did have to keep rubber bands inside of it though, which eventually wore out. But that game was awesome.
It was just so like it was so it shows you how it was a part of the just the mindset of America in the late 70s after this movie came out, smack dab in the middle of the 70s, right? So and I am about 10 years older than Drew, so sorry to say. And so this thing was on HBO like 9 times a day when I was a kid, and so basically you would just constantly just flip, Jaws. Oh, well, we've come in during the part where Quint scrapes his nails down the chalkboard. Oh, we've come in during the part where, Roy Scheider and Hooper are drinking wine at the kitchen table. And just constantly coming in so that it becomes just a weird part of the background of life as a child in the 70s. A very, well, actually, to be honest, at that point I'm talking about is probably the very early 80s. This is when HBO was just like, it had certain movies that just played over and over and over. So anyway, I don't even know if that's an opening perspective other than that you come back to this movie after we've seen all these other movies and it's still as good as you remember it. And as Joya pointed out, many times, just like the music, it is different from how you remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, the Jaws game is still better in my opinion, even though I love Nintendo. The Nintendo Jaws game I don't think is as fun as like a one with rubber bands and a hook.
I love the Jaws Nintendo game.
It's not good though. It's fun.
I haven't played it since I was a kid. I don't know.
It's not good. Just I have played it because I still play a lot of Nintendo games, and I was like, screw this game. I'm going to beat it this time because it's actually really hard. Regardless, like I'm sure there's some guy who's like a master of it, but I remember it being really hard, or at least because the controls are bad and you have to stab it with the front of your boat at the end. But that part sucks, and so I'm still going with it. The old Jaws game with the rubber band is a more fun game than
I would think so anyway. I mean, because something you can actually play with. And it's a physical freaking shark you can sit on the kitchen table. That's pretty great. You should put Halloween candy in it and make that the challenge. That's what things were like. I was
in the 70s, in the no seatbelt, no airbag era. That thing could snap your hand off.
That's right. Those were the days.
There was a game. I never. I guess there's the age gap in play here. I never saw the Jaws game, but there was a Little Shop of Horrors game that came out with the Rick Moranis version that sounds like an exact ripoff of the Jaws game, just with a plant instead of a shark.
I mean, at some point you would have to repurpose those hinges for something. It sounds like that's awesome. That's what happened. So, well, let's get started. So the movie begins with, it was straight off. You have to imagine it's 1975. You're sitting down. It's June. It's late in the summer, and you're sitting down for this movie in your local fourplex, and you are just sweeping through the water as this music plays, that whole da-da, and it gives you the opening credits, and then you immediately go to really the opening sequence of the film, which is Chrissy's Last Swim. This girl named Chrissy, who's a hippie, hanging out with her hippie friends, at a bonfire on the beach somewhere. We know we're in New England, somewhere or other, and these two hippie teenagers head to go swimming, but one is so stoned he doesn't make it. The other, Chrissy, she runs straight into the water. The sun is already down. She strips down. She goes swimming, and so far so good, except for that immediately she gets attacked by something under the water.
And let me stop you and say, I feel sorry for the poor actress who plays this girl, because apparently, when you're looking at the making of, in order to create the sound of her drowning, she had to be positioned head up, turned in front of a microphone while water was poured down her throat from above. Then when they're filming the scene, they have these 300-pound weights attached to her, and they're pulling, the crew is pulling on two different ones, on one side and the other. The crew is pulling on them to yank her back and forth, and this harness she's in is squeezing her ribs. It's horrible. I'm like, that poor woman.
But she actually said it was worse on the crew than it was on her.
Well, she's nice, but it seems like an awful thing.
It looks
horrifying.
Terrifying. I mean, this to me is one, if you go through the history of genre films, this is right up there with the shower scene in Psycho. This is horrifying.
It's really scary. It's very scary.
It's not as memorable as the shower scene in Psycho, but it is terrifying.
I disagree. If you want to know what makes people afraid of going swimming, I think this first scene does it for you right away. Because you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go swimming, and all of a sudden this thing has grabbed you that you can't see. She really sells it, too. She's a good actress.
She's screaming and her head off, and her stupid drunk boyfriend is passed out on the beach. What a jerk.
Yes. She grabs onto a buoy, nice
Not that he could have done anything,
a buoy, because she grabs onto one of those things and holds on to it. She's screaming more, and eventually she gets killed by this thing, and nobody on the beach can hear her. It's just scary. I mean, this is great. Steven Spielberg immediately has discovered that if you give the victim of your crime time to scream and beg, it makes this scene much scarier and much more horrifying. And exhilarating. So it starts out with this scene, and we're right away into a movie where we know what this is going to be about. There is a monster under the water, whatever the heck it is, and it's eating swimmers. So the next day, we meet. We go to the home of our main character, which is Roy Scheider playing the chief of police, Chief Brody, and we meet him at his home among his family, and we learn immediately. The movie is really, really good at giving you information very efficiently. We learn very quickly that he's new to town, new-ish. He bought the house recently. It's before the summer, so he's not used to all the sun, and he has a different accent from everybody else because he's from New York City and they're all from New England, and he has kids, and this is so great because for one thing, we are going to be with him through the whole movie. I mean, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but basically, Roy Scheider. It's hard for me to think of an exception other than the very, very beginning. Roy Scheider is in essentially every scene of the film. I can't think. As we go through, we can try to think of one.
Well, no, there's quite a few that he's not in because there's a lot of the kids. There's a lot of the kids just on their own out in the water and trying to get around those.
No, there will be cuts to the beach while he's standing there. But this isn't like Jaws 2 where we have whole subplots involving the kids.
Oh yeah, you're right.
In this one, basically, if Roy Scheider can't see it or hear it somewhere nearby, it doesn't get shown to us either. It's amazing. I rarely see a movie that follows the point of view of one character so religiously as it does here. And that's a choice that they make early on. But anyway, they introduce Roy Scheider and immediately gets called out to the beach, just like every cop in every thriller that there ever was. And there is a dead girl. So we've introduced this beautiful Garden of Eden and this beautiful town, and now there's a dead girl. And immediately, Roy gets, Scheider gets in his head that a shark has eaten this girl, and so he tells his deputy, "Hey, go." I mean, it's amazing how quickly he gets started in this. He goes, "There's a shark out there. Go tell the deputy to work the secretary, paint up signs, put up signs on the beaches, close the beaches, no swimming. I'm going to go figure this stuff out." And he runs around doing that. And so that brings us to the very first encounter with what will really be going on in the movie in the background of the fact that there's a big shark. And what's really going on is that there's a conflict between the way that the island works, which is to say it totally is reliant on tourists, and also the complete loathing of tourists. The fact that we need the tourists to come and we need them to spend their money, but we sure as hell don't want to tell them that they might get eaten, by sharks. And all of that is spoken for by the mayor.
Who's so scummy. What a scum. The business guys in this movie,
tell
I understand.
Tell us about the mayor, because we meet the mayor first on the street, just as Scheider is headed out to, put up a bunch of picket signs and stuff.
Yeah, well, he's such a businessman. I mean, he's everything that's wrong with, politics and capitalism right there. Everybody's the movie is so succinct in its dialogue of characters as well. You get this guy, and yes, of course he's looking out for his, the people in the town. This town, if we ruin summer, we ruin the town. But he's so scummy about it. You can't. Well, it's told some people this, and told people it's Barracuda, they'll get scared, but tell them it's a shark.
It's a motorboat. It was a motorboat.
Yeah.
Let's just say it was a motorboat.
Yeah, and he's like, he's so, and you kind of get the impression, he's, hey, you're new here, and the sheriff, I can appoint you. That kind of, he's throwing his weight around as well.
You're not from around here, are you? You don't know our ways.
Yeah, and he's throwing his weight around, and his, his political weight, and his, scummy capitalist weight.
Yeah.
And just really, there's a person dead, and he's like, isn't summer important? Look at all this business. Yeah, there's a dead girl. And he's not quite so nonchalant, but you can tell he's really, really about, the town. And maybe you have to do that a little bit as a mayor, but there's no compassion when he's talking about this girl. It's sad.
Oh, not at all.
In his mind, he's like, that's a thing that happens. That's business. But we don't want to ruin it for everybody.
It's like all the, all the car companies when they're like, well, we're willing to allow a certain number of people to die rather than, deal with it. And it's like only when they start getting the multi-million-dollar lawsuits.
Well, and
it's there are a few flipper babies. Kind of.
He has the capability to deny it at this point. In other words, he still has the ability to fool himself. He actually believes his own bullshit.
Well, I think in his head he's hoping it's an isolated incident and that it's not going to repeat
it never
itself.
happens with sharks.
But it's not just him. You know what? It's not just him, because let's fast forward a little bit to the little kid then because they keep the beaches open. And
wait, before you do that, I just want to point out what Scheider says. Because Scheider says, well, and he whines, essentially. He goes, well, do you think it was a motorboat? And the coroner goes, yeah. And the chief goes, he says, well, I'm just this is the most 8th grade thing I've ever heard, and you will ever hear again from Chief Brody. He goes, well, I'm just reacting to what I heard.
Yeah, that's what I was told. Well, it's not just 8th grade. It's also it's actually very much the soldiers, saying, I'm obeying orders.
It's any organization, man. That's the truth. So at this point,
you can tell, in his head, he's not quite buying. He's going along with it because he doesn't want to lose his newfound position. But you can tell him as a head he thinks this is all baloney.
Yeah, of course. No, he does. So then we go to the beach, and this kid gets eaten, and it's like this wonderful. I mean, gosh, there's this wonderful telescoping shot of Roy Scheider as they realize what's going on.
Okay, can you describe, or can anybody describe how this shot works?
It's that thing where, and I'm going to say it wrong.
He's afraid it's going to happen. And
so something happened. This kid's been attacked, and it's that thing where they lock the focus on the subject, but they push the camera. What is it? They pull the camera back, or they push the camera forward. I don't remember how it works. Yeah. So that everything seems to just kind of rush past him. I don't know.
What they do, it's called a dolly zoom.
Yeah.
And I don't know this firsthand. I only know this from what I've read about it. But we've seen it before. We've seen it in Vertigo. But basically, Spielberg has his eyes on Roy Scheider, who is seated in a chair, and then he starts zooming towards Roy Scheider at the same time as he, with the focus, he starts zooming in on Roy Scheider's face at the same time that physically the cinematographer is running backwards, on a track, is moving the camera backwards, and that increases the field of vision so that all the background moves and gets bigger.
Well, it's an effect that we've seen, and it's always brilliant.
And it is freaktastic because it makes you go, what the heck is going on?
Because it actually visually describes the feeling that you get in your stomach when something awful like that happens, where you're just like, oh, God. That's just horrifying.
Well, especially here, when, they can get, because, again, it's one of those things where I have seen it kind of overused or used in a really super cheesy manner. But here, you really do get the fact, he wanted to do all this stuff. And when he finally realized, I am responsible for something truly awful that's going to happen, this is one of the few examples where it is just amazingly effective and just really.
And the music that comes in at that time is just beautiful. It's so great. But what I was going to say before, though, was that now you're talking about the mayor. Then we go to the board now, and everyone is there, and we're talking about, okay, this shark. And there's still, everyone in the boardroom pretty much is saying, oh, we're not going to close the beaches. It's going to be so devastating to my business.
Yeah, they're still not convinced.
So not just the mayor. No wonder, I actually understand the mayor a little better after that scene, because he's got these jerks that he's working with who are all about the bottom line, which I understand, they don't want to lose they're making a living this way. But it's about, people getting killed, and they're still saying, no, you can't close the beaches. What? And they're like, 24 hours. Close it for 24 hours. They're like, 24 hours. Do you know how much money I'll lose in 24 hours? Oh, my gosh. So that's just, you see the kind of pressure that
it's astonishing and complete. By the way, I got to say, at this point, still pretty believable, because, it does seem very, very venal, but the guy who scratches his fingernails down the chalkboard spells out exactly what it is that all of them are very afraid, because like in a place where all the money comes in over Christmas time. Yeah, it's Clint. But like one of those, like a Christmas place, this is a summer place, and they need to make all their money, right now, or they're not going to make any more money. And so we turn, and a man introduces himself and starts to talk and says, you need to listen to me, or you're going to be exactly what you're afraid of. You're going to be on welfare all Christmas long. But what he says is, this great speech, does anybody want to describe what the hell Quint is?
Quint?
Do you want to tell us about Quint?
Quint, to me, is a holdover from your supernatural horror films. He is a monster slayer. I mean, he does not seem. Everybody else in this movie, and even though this is a film very much of the 70s, everybody in this film is still contemporary enough to where they feel like you could walk out into the street and maybe meet somebody like the characters in this movie. Quint does not seem like that. Quint is elevated slightly. He is this other. He is got this almost supernatural quality about himself, and he immediately becomes extremely fascinating just within that brief scene.
And it's Robert Shaw with his weird
alcoholic Robert Shaw,
crooked teeth, his sort of his bulbous, wrinkly body, and his rough hands and his cap.
He's
and
like a pirate.
He's sort of this perfect. Yeah, I mean, he's a true old salt. He's truly like on The Simpsons. Whenever they introduce an old salt in the bar for some reason, he is one of those characters. Now, here's something that will blow your mind. Okay, this is 1975, so we got to figure. I guess it's being shot in I don't know the dates, but let's say it's being shot in late '74. All right. Robert Shaw was also in From Russia with Love, which came out in 1962. Okay, so that's just, 12 years earlier? And in 1960, in From Russia with Love, Robert Shaw also appears, and he's the bad guy in that movie. And he is the extraordinarily tall Red Grant. He has blonde hair. He has a sculpted body, so he's big and muscular like Tarzan, basically. And, and he's smart as a whip, and he's a Russian assassin and all this stuff. And it's just very strange to look at what a complete and total transformation Robert Shaw has put himself through. And you want to say, oh, Robert Shaw's a big old drunk, and so you're just looking at the debilitation of a person's body over 12 years. But that's not completely true, because he's also in Robin and Marion, which is pretty contemporaneous with Jaws, and in that one he plays the Sheriff of Nottingham, and that's yet another complete physical transformation. This guy is good. I mean, this guy's really interesting, no matter what.
The character of Quint stands out very much. When you look at the other two heroes, you look at Hooper and Brody. The other important thing to think about with Quint is, even though Brody is a sheriff, he has this very New York, quippy, liberal sensibility. And, Hooper is, of course, he's a scientist. He's for money. Quint represents a blue-collar.
Yes.
But even though he has this elevated quality, this sort of supernatural quality to him, he's also got an earthiness too. He's a very interesting study in a character that's made up of contrasts.
Yes, I think that's right. You later find out, you know, he begins to show a lot of different sides as the movie goes along, because at first he's a jerk, and he, you know, when they take off on the adventure, he enjoys scandalizing the chief's wife by telling dirty jokes, and he, you know, but then the moment they're on the water, he starts to sing songs, and even though he was mean to Hooper about being, who we haven't talked about yet, but mean to Hooper about being a college boy, he soon goes, you know, Hooper drives the boat. So he you know, he comes to trust Hooper, and then he gives that speech later on where he's just extraordinary. He's a very, very good narrator, you know. This guy, it turns out that this Boston Old Salt can actually spin a yarn that goes for, like, you know, 3 pages probably.
Well, and then, Robert Shaw what he contributed to the film, aside from being really difficult to work with because he was always drunk, was really something, because he actually wrote, like, that scene when he's talking about
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis. He actually wrote the final draft of that because they kept fighting about it between them, like the writers, you know, Gottlieb and Spielberg, I think it was, were fighting over it, and so he just wrote his own draft, and they were like, yes, perfect, let's go with this. And, like, he's the one who comes up with the quote, you know, when he's just kind of, like, mouthing off, and he's talking about the Here Lies the Grave of Mary Lee.
Yes.
He's the one who came up with that. So he does, when he's sober, he contributes quite a bit, but they actually couldn't even use the Indianapolis scene the first time they shot it because he was so drunk, because they had to come back the next day and do it again, but then he did it brilliantly.
That's interesting. I had heard that. I'm shocked to hear that. I thought that he was one of those super functional alcoholics like George Reeves, who, you know, is capable of being completely, you know, snockered and yet still capable of.
No, he was apparently a gentleman when he was sober. Roy Scheider says he was a gentleman when he was sober, but he was a complete jerk when he was. I can't remember what the exact quote is, but he said that he was all the other times he was a total jerk to work with.
So just to that thought about Robin and Marion, by the way, I just looked it up. Robin and Marion came out in 1976. So they're really literally, you know, back to back. He plays Quint and he plays the Sheriff of Nottingham. And I cannot, in my imagination, conceive of 2 utterly different roles that he does just next to one another. Anyway, so we meet that guy, but everybody they listen to his speech. He gives the speech. You all know me. You know what I can do. He wants $10,000. They go, thanks, but no thanks. You know, the people in the room, they don't care about the stupid, you know, the hunt for the shark. They just want to get back to business. They still think it's not going to happen again.
Well, there is that really, you know, the mom of the little boy shows up in her morning clothes.
She shows up when they're
right. That is later.
She's put out the $3,000, so she's already she casts a weight on the scene because she's offered $3,000 to somebody to catch the shark. And Quentin shows up to this meeting and says, "Listen, I'll do it for 10, not for 3." They ignore him, and the very next, of course, a whole bunch of crazy people descend on the city of Amity to go hunt the shark and win $3,000. Right. And that is really great. I mean, what's wonderful here is as you're watching this, did anybody have this sensation? You're watching this and going, "Oh wait, isn't this the movie about about being afraid of the giant shark?" Because at this point, we are truly watching an adventure film. You know,
it's also, you know, the same thing we get. You know, it's sea rednecks for all intents and purposes. You know, let's go on a hunt, and it's the hunt for, you know, name it, Bigfoot, werewolf, whatever you want to call it. Like, you know, and also, and everybody else, you know, Quint's like, oh man, these guys, and then also, you know, like, Dreyfuss's character is just like, same thing. These guys are going to kill themselves. This is not, you know,
the shark thing. Where we meet that guy.
Well, these people don't really know how big the shark is, too. I mean, these people are thinking, you know, it's a normal shark, and this shark is anything but normal.
Right. Well, you know, it's a monster shark. It's a monster in a non-monster kind of setting. You know, everything else is, you know, just and it's monstrous too because it's so real. Like I guess because it's not a werewolf or something. We're like, man, maybe that thing could exist. And if you've seen enough, you see a video, and now we have Shark Week, so we know there's at least something big out there. Depending on how doctored or weird, whatever new things they have to do since Shark Week's been around for so long.
We definitely know that prehistoric sharks could get this big and bigger.
Of course. But I just like, and before we talk too much about Quinn, I really like Hooper. Hooper shows up. Hey man, I'm the guy you asked for, and then we kind of get a little bit more of his character where we find out.
Well, this is the first time he shows up.
Guy.
So yeah, tell us about Hooper in general.
Well, he shows up. Hey, I'm the marine biologist you asked for, and oh, okay, cool. Hey,
actually,
really
he shows up and immediately gets told that he needs to get those guys out of that boat before they sink, before they get eaten or whatever.
So he's like kind of being the voice of reason, and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to help save your town from itself, and and as we go along, like first we have the Brody Hooper kind of relationship, where they kind of like, okay, I get who you are and that kind of thing, and we find out he's from money, and he's he doesn't need to do this, but he's had an experience with sharks, and then has a further experience, which is really scary. With he goes to examine. They go out to examine a boat, and they find a corpse, which is also super. No matter what, is just a great jump scare. Like
this is oh boy, that's a great jump scare. We get to watch him. He has, by the way, a super rich boat. First boat we see, he has a super rich boat that he bought with his own money because he's super rich, and they play that up a great deal. And they go to check out. He thinks that this shark that is still out there. All this context, by the way, is coming in the context of the dumbasses who've come to town have actually caught a shark. And so Hooper and Roy, who immediately become like best friends, go. They drink a little, and then they go out and check out the shark. And then Hooper decides, hey, let's go hit the water and see if we can find the real thing. And
because this shark does not have any people in it.
Yeah, and that confrontation is also really good. Again, there's such great shorthand, and just everything's really succinct. I mean, this is such a well-made movie. They're catching the shark, and Hooper's like, that's not it. And, he's like, let's cut it open. And of course, and one of the few things the mayor does, even though he's out to save his own butt, it goes, I don't want, like, a kid to spill out of the stomach of this shark.
Well, let's not cut it open in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, isn't that the scene, though, when the mom of the kid comes up? And she says,
the scene,
she says, she comes up to Roy Scheider and just gives him, a piece of remind about how, he knew what had happened to this girl. He knew there was a shark out there, and he still let everybody go on the beach, and that's why her son's dead. And she leaves, and the mayor, who's been standing there, goes, she's wrong. And he's like, no, she's right. And I'm thinking, she's right more about the mayor, but I mean, I guess they're both at fault. But
well,
really,
also,
the mayor is the one
she slaps him, which she said in the making of that she like had people get her to slap them. Fans of Jaws would be like, oh
my gosh,
you're the actress, slap me. And she did it up until a point where she's like, I'm not slapping anybody anymore. But what was great is Brody really, like, you can see how affected he is by this. And he also, one thing he doesn't do is he doesn't, well, also, like, his expression as he kind of walks away, she walks away, he doesn't turn around and go, hey, by the way, guys, the mayor's the one. He doesn't rat out the mayor or anything.
Right.
He really goes like, you know what? This is on me. I'm the public official responsible for this, and I take responsibility.
Right.
And at that point,
there's a lot of people who wouldn't do that, who would just go, well, the mayor said things.
He made me.
Right.
Just following orders.
He's never going to make that mistake again.
So they go.
He's but what I love is we learn something else about him because he goes home, and this is the scene that both sort of cements his relationship with his family, but also really cements his relationship with Hooper, which is that he goes home and he hangs out with his kids, and he sort of redraws power from hanging out with his children, and goofing around with his son, which is so sweet. The presentation of the parental relationship and the marital relationship in this movie, I thought, is just extremely well observed. It's I don't know if this is Steven Spielberg just giving us his vision of the way he thinks families work, but it's beautiful. It's wonderful to watch, and it feels very very real.
Or the Verna Fields, who's the editor that did a lot of the work too.
It may well be. And it's not like this in the book. I mean, I haven't read the book, but in the book, their marriage is strained. Mrs. Brody has an affair with Hooper. The book gets really super complicated. The movie doesn't do any of that stuff at all.
I think it's kind of good to see, a good family from time to time.
Yeah.
There's a thing in Hollywood where there's no tension in that. It's like,
right,
man, well, every once in a while, can't we see a good? Can the tension be external?
There's enough tension with the dang shark.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That was what
Spielberg
was thinking too. He was like, look, the shark is the conflict. I mean, there is conflict in the movie, but he's like, forget all this interrelationship conflict, really. Except
and not just and also it's muddy. I mean, it just muddies everything up.
Yeah.
But we go back out. So you were talking about the jump scare, and they go back out on the boat at night, and he's going to go check out the sunken where there's been fishermen that have gone missing and divers that have gone missing, and so they're going to go down, and he's going to dive at the scene of this wreckage. And he goes down, Hooper goes down, and he's kind of like, he sees this submerged boat, and he's kind of poking around. He finds this giant, huge shark tooth, and he's all excited because he's going to take this back and show them that, here, this is the real shark, not that other one. And holy cow, this head pops out. And apparently
a hole in a hole.
Pops out of a hole in the hole, right? And apparently, when Spielberg first showed the movie, he had done that scene in the ocean, and the people screamed, but he wanted them to scream more, so he went right back and shot it in a pool, so it would be clearer. And they screamed so loud the next time, but then they actually didn't scream as loud when they saw the shark. So he decided at that point that you can only have one big scare because then they're ready. They're like, okay, we're ready. So, but anyway, I thought that was funny that he actually reshot it to get louder.
What's great about that jump scare too is that in so many lesser films, the jump scare is just a jump scare. This actually serves a purpose because it causes him to drop the tooth.
It drops the tooth.
Right?
Yes, that's right. Oh my God, that's so cool. And by the way, boy, Dreyfuss can just sell anything. He sells his fear under the water. He sells his hyperventilating while he's doing the autopsy on the shark. He sells his hyperventilating when he checks out the body of the girl who got attacked on the beach. He's always I have no idea if Richard Dreyfuss is like a real person in this movie, but he sure is an interesting person, and in other words, I believe in Hooper.
Well, it's funny, when we did the Evil Dead remake, there's an actor in there in that film that looks a lot like my buddy Hunter, but Hooper actually reminds me so much of my friend Hunter, like the personality. Hunter's not an ocean guy, but he's very much a naturalist, and he can tell you just about anything about the animal kingdom and everything. That's so. If you would say that there are guys like this, yes, there absolutely are guys like this.
I like him. I like his geekiness, but his physicality. That he's out there diving and stuff, and he's like Bruce Wayne. But I also really like. I like how he, think of a lot of the lines he has to say. I'm not saying that they're impossible lines to say, but somehow you believe him as a person. Like there's a point where he's really just met Martin, in a sense, when they've catch that shark. It's before the autopsy. It's before everything, and he's hanging out with Martin on the boat, and he goes, "This isn't the shark," and he goes, "The fact." The chance that these bozos could catch that shark, it's 100 to 1. Martin, it's 100 to 1. And he's really close up to him, and he's being it's intimate in like a friendly sort of way, and it immediately sells these two guys can really communicate with one another around all the craziness. Like all these crazy people talking to one another, and Dreyfuss is the one who's really bringing that to the role, because it's not really Roy Scheider. Roy Scheider is doing his own thing. In a way, he's very internalized. And Dreyfuss is just sort of all over the place. It's wonderful. And it'll be really great when he meets Quint, because then you'll have these three utterly different performances going on.
Well, in your literature class, they call that a confederacy of opposites, and I think this is a great example of that.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because and to think that you've got three opposites, that these three guys, because very quickly, we can skip. I mean, not that it's a big, but in the interest of time, let's skip forward and just stipulate the shark comes back, and so they decide, look, we need to go hook up with Quint, and so Quint and Hooper.
Well, I will say that the final scene on the beach, to me, where is so Hitchcockian that I felt like we would be doing our listeners a disservice.
Okay, which one are you thinking of? Are you thinking of? They
set it up. They set it up to where you were all thinking that the shark is on this one side of the beach, because there's these kids that have made like a makeshift fen, and they're scaring everybody.
Yeah.
But actually, the shark has entered the shallow end where the little kids and the old people go to swim.
Where Roy Scheider's kids are.
Where Roy Scheider's kids are.
Yeah.
And although they do this wonderful tip of the hat, like where the point where they're directing you all over to this one the deep end, so to speak, they are not playing. They are not playing that famous Jaws thing. But then you have Roy Scheider's kids sitting there talking to this one guy in a boat, and then all of a sudden you see the head of the shark, and this is the first time you really get a good idea of how big the shark is. It just grabs the guy, and then you start hearing that dun 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 dun, and that to me, again, such a great like Alfred Hitchcock style misdirect. I love it.
It pays off. It's at that point actually. Since you mentioned it, that's the point. When the shark goes into the pond to attack people, nobody is primed to listen at that point, because they've just had this false scare with the stupid kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just that, but they also caught that other shark, and so everything's fine.
Well,
I want to say something real quick about because you're talking about Hitchcock. Okay, so I did find the description, Jason. I want to correct this, what we said about the shot earlier. So what it is the forward tracking zoom out shot is the Jaws shot, quote unquote, and it's a reverse of the forward zoom reverse tracking shot that was used in Vertigo.
So I described it exactly the opposite of what he did.
You described the Vertigo one, and then they did the opposite one. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify in case anybody out there is going, no, that's not how it was.
Now nobody will have to write in about that.
Not that thing anyway.
So but on the TV in my office, I just saw that scene where the shark comes up and grabs the dude in the pond. But yes, that is a great, because at that moment, there's a lady who yells from the pond and goes, "Hey, there's a shark over here."
Yeah.
And everybody's like, shut up.
Even Roy Scheider rolls his eyes, and then his wife goes, "Well, the kids are over there." So it's like, okay, I guess I better go check it out.
So it's after that point that there can no longer be any denial. Everybody is down with the fact that there's a giant shark in the water. Even the mayor, who is reduced to this like blubbering crazy person in the hospital, he is very quick. He's sort of randomly
reciting. He says, "My kids were also in that pond."
Yes, they were also on the beach.
Yeah. And mind you, he was the one who, just in the most probably evil scene that he has, is going up to various city fathers on the beach and saying, "Listen, we need to encourage people to use the water."
He goes to old people. He's like, "Come on, take your kids. They're great. It's probably grandparents and their grandkids. Like,
why are you getting in?
It's so rotten. That's oh my God.
He's everything wrong with politics. Like, there's good maybe there's good politics. I don't know, but there's good business people and stuff. But he's everything wrong with both parts.
Yes.
In the guise of, hey, I'm saving the town, but man, scummy. so scummy.
But once he can no longer deny that there's a shark, then it's easy enough, because now you just get him to sign the requisition order to hire that guy Quint, as Brody calls it, and to go out and kill the shark so everybody can go back to their normal business. And so now we go into really basically Act 3 of the film. I mean, this is amazing how quick, when you think about it, how like perfectly this thing clips along. And when you consider how much stuff we've seen in the movie, and yet how efficiently it's telling it, now we're going to go back to that guy Quint, who, by the way, has a crew. He has people who are helping him load up his boat and everything like that. But basically he intends to go by himself, and then he's got to bring the chief because the chief is the paying customer, and then he's convinced that he's going to bring Hooper because he says, quote-unquote, for ballast, which means just to take up space and weight. But he learns, immediately that Hooper has seamanship skills, so he'll be fine. And very, very quickly, Hooper just becomes the pilot of the boat, which is great. So Quint orders him around, Hooper pilots it, and that's cool. This is the point, as they head out into the ocean, that we have what Tony was talking about, where the music becomes jaunty. The fact that we've been watching people get killed kind of drifts into the background, because now it is, it's the Fellowship of the Ring. It's the gathering of the three. They're going out in a boat, and they're going to go get this shark, and it's wonderful. All those pipes are playing. Yeah.
Before he has his really, just, drag down, oh man, Quint speech. The part they start hanging out, and this is really the character development part, and it's done so well. The part where they're trading scars, like, check this out, check that out.
That is
and
wonderful.
There's this camaraderie. This is the kind of stuff where, like, this is the most doodly, like, manly adventure stuff. This is the stuff where, like, if guys had bachelor parties that were just this, those bachelor parties were, we're going to a cabin, or we're going to do this, we're not going to go to the strip clubs. I think everybody wishes it was this thing that happens. Like,
without the shark attack.
Without the shark attack. I don't know. There's probably somebody who's like, let's do a shark attack themed something. But anyway, like, all the parts with the, like, where they're trading stories before it kind of turns dark, where they're trading stories and they're showing each other scars, and they're, there's beers around and they're singing, like, all of that stuff. That's the stuff of been since we could tell tales of the sea.
Yeah.
It's distilled into this one just fantastic scene. There's so many things like that in this movie. I mean, that's why they're willing to restore it. That's why it is what it is today. So many years later. But
I mean,
you watch it again, and you're just really like, that's it. That's people on an adventure. Guys, tough guys on an adventure.
That's when he gets that wonderful
speech. They've kind of, Hooper isn't seen as that tough either, right? And so they all kind of get together and decide, you know what, we're the adventurers. This is something we can do. Yeah, let's do it.
That's when you get to know what a badass Shaw's character really is.
Just before we do that, I should mention that structurally what happens, and then, Tony, you can lay down the Indianapolis or Julia, whichever one wants to tell it. But I just want to mention structurally what happens is they have one confrontation with the shark, which is a major one. Okay,
right.
It's the one where they actually introduce it. But they did it with
where Roy Scheider improvises the line, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah, absolutely, which is like one of the greatest lines.
One of the best lines ever,
Can I say, as much maligned as the animatronic shark is by some movie fans, there is that great sequence around this point in the movie where you see the shark swim alongside the boat, and you see that it's actually just as big as the boat.
Yeah.
And that is amazing to me. I love that.
Well, another thing when you mentioned that too, I watched the documentary and all the bits and everything, and I really do think we've talked about this before, but I think the less is more really does work here. They talk a lot about, look, the shark, it didn't work even partially. Like almost every frame of workable footage is in this movie.
Yeah.
He's like, But now he's like, now we would do this with CG, and you'd see it, and it'd be this, and then he's like, I'm glad that didn't happen because
because they had to be creative.
They had to be creative. They had to do things that set up suspense rather than like, because we have eventually things come along. We have Deep Blue Sea, which is a pretty flawed movie. As fun as it is, it's not a great movie. It's certainly not Jaws, right?
Well, with the girl getting yanked around the way we saw her, I think it was a lot scarier.
Yeah, or also
all of that.
The thing that they added in a lot of was having the camera be from the viewpoint of the shark, because they didn't want to show they couldn't show the shark, and they have him coming up to people, which is really scary too.
The suspense of like the barrels being pulled and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That you do,
and it makes when you do see this. It makes when you do see the shark, it's more surprising and it's more frightening. I shudder to think what a remake of this would be like. It would probably be wall to wall giant shark.
Well, they talk about that a lot. They're like, now we would do it. Spielberg lays out. He's like, now we would do this, and he's like, I'm really, really glad we didn't have that. Because it made us. I mean, it didn't work when they started. There's, numerous parts about how it was a super troubled production. They went over budget. They didn't have everything laid down. Everything wasn't solidified. I mean, it's a story. I mean, there's books and documentaries galore written about this, but it's so. Despite that, I think again, when you have those certain limitations, you have to get creative. And I think, for a really good director like Spielberg, and, who's got a really good crew, he's got a great cinematographer, he's got good people, Dreyfuss and, just everybody, the whole cast, all the actors, you've got all these people, and they're all doing just a really good job.
Yeah.
There's some magic to that. I mean, it would be really hard. So much of this is lightning in a bottle just because of the way it had to be created as well.
No,
you're talking about it being a troubled production. It also just goes to show you the difference between, movie. This was one of the biggest hits of all time. It was a troubled production. Nowadays, because of the internet, if we even get an inkling that a movie is troubled, we are ready to carve that movie a new one before we've ever even seen it.
That's a really, really good point. That being a troubled production does not guarantee that a movie won't be good. And the last big, remember how people were really primed for Titanic to be a massive flop, by the way? And Titanic is not nearly the movie that Jaws is. But having said that, people were ready for that thing to just be a disaster because it had gone over budget, it had been all kinds of trouble, and it ended up being fantastic. But I agree with you. I think a movie that has a hard time, goes over budget, goes over time now, you hear about it on the internet, and that movie's in danger. But I just wanted to say this real quick, and then I want one of you to explain the Indianapolis speech to us. But where this business comes, they have that whole thing. You're going to need a bigger boat. They see the shark for the first time, and that's the first time where, after all of their conflicts, they all act in unison. These are the warriors finally have their first meeting with the enemy. They shoot it with a harpoon. They attach a barrel to it, and they have, in a sense, won their first skirmish. They're well and truly underway in this battle, and so that's the point where they then have a very late in the movie midpoint. Midpoints always involve a party, usually a campfire, sometimes songs. If there's double sexes, there will be love scenes, and and in this movie, it's the equivalent of a campfire. They're going to hang out, they're going to sing songs and drink, and they do the scar sharing. But all that stuff comes after the first battle, and it literally is like that. So they scar share, laugh, 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 and then there's a turn. Hey, what's that scar? Oh, that's the USS Indianapolis, Mr. Hooper. And then everything takes a turn, and everybody just sits back literally and listens to Quint give a speech that goes on for 4 minutes. It's a long speech. And does anybody want to don't recite the speech? Well, you're welcome to.
Of course.
You can do it.
No, well, I think, what struck me is later, what happens to Quint is even more poignant after this, because, his boat goes down, and he and, what does he say, 100 people, hundreds of people, many, many people are stranded in the ocean as they slowly get picked off by sharks.
Yep.
over the course of, he said, hey, it was over a week before they even reported us, missing.
Yeah, because
they're delivering the Hiroshima bomb.
Right. And, man, just
yeah,
in the way
he says 1,100, I took a note, 1,100 men went in and 300 plus came out. The Sharks took the rest.
Yeah.
It's just, all of it. Just, he gives it. It's such a great speech, and nothing I can say, I would do it justice. You just have to see it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it would be a mistake for us almost to quote any of the lines in it.
It just takes that, they're having a good time and beers are out and everything, and you're just like, there's nothing you can do that will follow that. That sets the tone for where this turns into, we actually now have to fight a shark, a huge one. And the fact that, he's the man for it, but there's also, he doesn't want to go back to that. Yeah. And so when the shark finally, gets him, that, it's the, horrible, terrible end to why does it have to be snakes,
Yes.
if Indiana Jones got eaten by a giant snake, it would be that, like all of your dreams that you thought you had gotten away with for, a horrible nightmares. I'm sure he had PTSD about it. Is realized.
It's like Final Destination. Like you're supposed to get eaten by sharks. Just deal with it because it's going to happen. You can't escape it.
And it just makes it, when you see it in that context, it just makes it even more just terrifying, terrible, poignant. Yeah. All of it.
But we do get to see a little glimpse of how insane he is when they're fighting the shark, and Roy Scheider's trying to call for help, and he goes and starts slamming the radio with a bat, like destroys the radio.
He's got kind of a Captain Ahab thing going on. But
they were actually going to start the movie with him watching Moby Dick, actually, and laughing. It was kind of like the Cape Fear scene where he's just laughing and making rude comments. And all the people were leaving the theater. But when Spielberg tried to get the permission to use Moby Dick, he couldn't get it from oh God, I'm blanking on his name. The main actor who played it.
That was oh God. Now I'm trying to remember who started as Ahab.
I'll find it real quick here and then I'll tell you.
No, it was the guy who played MacArthur. Oh.
Yeah. So it says Gregory Peck.
Yes.
He said that he couldn't get the Peck held part of the rights to the movie, and when he approached him for the permission, he turned him down. This is from IMDb. He turned him down not because he thought it was a bad idea to use the film that way, but because Peck didn't like his performance in Moby Dick, and he didn't want the film to be seen again.
Wow. That's interesting. But okay, so at this point,
Clint doesn't go quietly into the night though. Like when he's getting kicked off by the shark, like he's stabbing the shark.
Yes. I actually, to be honest with you, think it's a perfectly fitting end for Quint. And let's kind of jump to that because this is what happens. They have that speech, and then immediately the shark attacks them, and the boat starts to sink. I mean,
the shark flops itself up onto the boat and starts tearing it apart.
Well, they do come up. Let's go through. They do come up with a way. Yeah, they do come up with a way. They're like, well, we're going to inject it.
Yeah.
And they they put Hooper in a cage, and that goes horribly awry.
Yeah. It's really one after
they're stuck out
Hooper,
there.
Quint, Brody. There's really just 3 scenes in the movie left. Hooper, Quint, Brody. First, it's like, Hooper, I shall kill it by stabbing it in the mouth with this spear and in my cage.
Well, it's going to inject it with, he's going to, kill it with poison. He's going to poison it, basically.
Correct.
And that just goes
That's
terribly.
Absolutely right. Yeah. It does go terribly, but it's a great scene because they drop him down in a cage, and the shark attacks the cage, and Hooper disappears behind some coral reefs, and so we know that he's out there. We just kind of forget all about him because immediately now the ship is sinking even more, and Robert Shaw briefly looks at a life jacket, even though he said, I'll never put on a life jacket again. He looks at one, and then he goes, and then he gets eaten by the shark. And boy, is it scary. I mean,
it's terrifying. And a horrible death. All of it is just, yeah.
He gets, the boat is literally sinking, slipping into the waves in a sense. The shark is up on the deck, and Quint just slides into it, beating it with his fists and screaming and spitting up blood. And, I keep thinking everybody of my generation was watching this at 9 years old. I saw this this probably like 1,000 times, you know. So yes, down goes. So now and all that's left is Brody. Brody is climbing around on
the important thing is while all the stuff from the wreckage of the boat, a air tank falls into the shark's mouth. This is very important.
We've got these compressed air tanks that were brought on for Hooper. There is part for his breathing apparatus and I guess whatever else. I don't know. But the point is he's brought compressed air tanks that they've sold to us numerous times. And so, be careful of those things. They'll blow up if they get, if they knock around too much or whatever. So one goes in the shark's mouth because everything's going in the shark's mouth because the boat is basically tipped on its end and pouring things out. And Brody, he figures it out before he tells us. He really does have it figured out. He just waits for a shot, waits, and then he shoots the compressed air tank and he blows the shark up. And I have no idea if that's ridiculous or not. I literally...
There's a Mythbusters episode about it.
Really?
Yeah.
So is it ridiculous? If you had like a 2-ton mammal with that had a compressed air tank embedded in it, and
2-ton mammal?
Well, my point is, if you had a lion...
Fish.
I know this is a fish, but my point is, I'm trying to think of something this big. Actually, there's nothing this big. Okay, fine. If you got a shark.
Well, yeah, a whale would be this big, but yeah.
Yeah, whale or
shark.
Killer whale.
My point is, would it blow up this way? I have no idea. Couldn't say.
I don't remember the conclusion of the Mythbusters episode, but I'm sure you could easily find it. If I remember correctly, I think that they concluded that it was in fact impossible to blow up a shark this way. But, I don't think they were really worried about the reality of that because also in real life, sharks don't develop personal vendettas against people. So, I mean, that's not, this is not a movie, there's a veneer of realism here, but this movie isn't overly concerned with realism, and God bless it.
You're saying that this is the most well-made William Castle film ever produced.
I'm saying it's a very, very, very well-done monster movie, and there's nothing wrong about that. Just because the monster could theoretically exist doesn't mean, and that's heavily theoretically, because great white sharks are big. I don't know if they've ever caught one quite this big, and even if they have, again, sharks don't behave like this in real life.
Well, and just because a smart scientist character in a movie says something really fast as though he's known it for years, that doesn't mean those things are true. It just means they're true in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's perfectly okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, somebody in the chat room points out, they go, that he loved the way Quint sang Farewell and Adieu. They sing, Fair Spanish Ladies, and it's so great. Actually, they sing several songs, and that goes back to the manliness. In this case, they had manly singing, and just wonderful.
No, I know. Like I said, that's the when dudes talk about an epic weekend or a get together or whatever.
Yes.
What really struck me, only watching it this time, was like that's what the perfect version of that right there.
Yes.
In a tiny, the distilled version of that, because it's not that long. It's just a few minutes. But that's what everybody kind of wants. Like, we had remember that weekend where we compared scars just before we got attacked by a shark?
Yes.
That's kind of what people are looking for. Like, if you want to, if you're listening to this and you're wondering what your husband and his friends are like thinking about when they're talking about these epic weekends or this get together we're going to do, or we're all going to go to Vegas or whatever, they're all hoping it turns out like this. Without the shark.
Yeah.
But that part, that section where they're singing and everything like that, that's and again, it's the time immemorial. It's the hall scene from Beowulf. It's name any adventure where the adventurers have to steal up before they go fight something or do something.
Well, like I said,
right
it's usually after the first taste of conflict
Sure.
You know, like I say, Fellowship of the Rings is like this. You know, every great adventure has this. So Brody blows up the shark, and at that moment, you know, he grabs onto something to float on, and then up pops Dreyfus, and Dreyfus is alive, and so they you know, head back to town.
Which he wasn't supposed to be, by the way. The script actually had it that he died, so they couldn't get it. The shark that was they had attacking the cage. They actually were like filming an actual shark attacking the cage. When they finally got the shark finally did attack the cage, the Dreyfus dummy wasn't in it. so they couldn't use it. So just them using that footage and saving Dreyfus's life. So.
Which again, like, reminded me of kind of like the end of The Thing, although not as dramatic, not as, you know, mystery. There's not as much mystery, but like it kind of has that like, whew, okay, we're the heroes. We're here. Like
it's happy because they're like they both laugh and then they help each other to get back to the shore.
Yeah.
Although it is, you know, the fact that they are so happy-go-lucky, you know, I know Quint was not the most likable guy in some ways.
No, but it's not like they're happy. They're just it's just over and they're relieved. I mean, you've laughed at, like, I don't know if you have, but you know, you'll have like a near miss in a car, you know, you'll slip and slide for a minute and then you almost crash and then you don't crash and you're just like laugh because you're just so relieved. So it's not that they're actually joyful that all these people have died, you know. They just think they're happy it's over.
I believe that this is a good death for Quint.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if Quint is a Klingon, this is the battle, you know, and I, you know, well, what do you want for Quint? Do you seriously want Quint to die of old age in some rest home somewhere?
Quint's a fictional character from a you know, a fan's perspective. Anytime I want to see Quint and revisit Quint, I can just rewatch the film. I'm just saying from a character's. And I completely understand where Julie is coming from, but I don't know that, you know, this is the only time I watched this movie where that kind of stuck out to me as a little odd.
I still see it in the same way as like, oh man, we survived. Like that's crazy. I think there's once they get out of the situation, get back on the beach. You know, I think is the time where you're like, oh, damn, you know. We lost Quint. But at the time, you're just so like, we just, you know, destroyed a giant shark that was going to eat us and ate our boat. You know, at least capsized our boat. Like, that was crazy. And oh man, so glad you popped up. Like I thought you were dead. Whew, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but again, like I said, like when I was watching it this time, I was like, hey, it kind of, you know, another one of my favorite movies is The Thing, and it kind of felt like that. A little bit, but of course, like I said, without the mystery. Like here, the creature is clearly, you know, has exploded into a lot of shark parts.
Yeah, the sharks aren't coming back.
Being eaten by seagulls, no less.
Yeah, fantastic, man.
Hey, I just had a thought I hadn't thought about before. I was reading that the only predator that a great white shark has is an orca whale, and that's why he names the ship Orca. I'm guessing, because that's the name of his boat.
It's also the name of a terrible Jaws ripoff movie.
I still have a soft spot
in
my heart for that movie, but yeah, it's a great.
I forgot about it. That had Richard Harris in it, didn't it? That's like, oh my God.
I can't remember.
But yeah, the first thing that dies in Jaws 2 is an orca, and it never dawned on me though that had more to do with a sort of FU to the makers of the movie Orca than a reference to anything else. I think it's more like, you know, take that, stupid Jaws ripoffs. We'll be the best Jaws ripoff ever with Jaws 2. But okay, so, wow, we've taken forever going through this movie, but I've never had a better time. Let's go ahead.
Yeah.
We should probably do our final thoughts and then come back around again for any endorsements that we might have. There's so much more, by the way, that we could talk about this movie. There's lots and lots and lots. We didn't talk about the class system. We didn't talk about the way, you know, we didn't talk about all the interesting fishing things you learn with the fishing reels and stuff. There's so much more.
This is like, we'd easily do at least like 3 episodes on just this. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
There's so much.
Have you ever noticed that the simpler the movie, a lot of times the more there is to talk about, in a sense? You know, that the simpler movies often run a little.
I don't know if I
Well,
would call this movie simple. It's layered enough. It's straightforward, I think, is a better way to describe
elegant
it.
is a better word, actually. You know, there's an elegance to the construction of the movie Jaws. That,
I mean, again, this is an amazingly well-crafted movie.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless, outside of any genre, I mean, this is a classic. This goes down in history as just a really, really great film.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess that kind of
this.
dovetails into my final impression. Like, you know, this is one of those you have to see. If you're a film lover, you have to watch it. Doesn't matter if you're going to get scared at some point or whatever. This is just an extremely well-crafted movie. Amazing, you know. And again, the restoration, like, short of going to see a restored 35 millimeter print, like, the Blu-ray is truly amazing. Like, I'm glad I got to catch it, because it's something else.
Very cool. Drew, do you have any final thoughts about Jaws?
I've been trying to get us to do this movie for a few summers now, so I'm happy we finally come around and
it's Shark Week, so perfect, right?
And it's on Shark Week, which was not originally. No, I don't think any of us really realized initially. But happy Shark Week.
Drew.
Of course
we did. Of course we did. What are you talking about? It's all planned. Part of the plan.
All planned. But this is a great movie. It is, you know. If you were to ask me, like, my top 10 scariest movies, or actually this would probably be in there. You know, my fearful reactions to it have somewhat numbed due to repeat viewings, of course. But you know, it's you know, this movie certainly did for swimming what Psycho did for showers. I mean, this is a great movie, and like Tony said, it's a great movie in any genre. And if you haven't watched, I'm sure everybody who listens to this podcast has seen Jaws. If you haven't watched it in a while, I hope that us doing this will galvanize you to go give it a revisit.
Yeah, absolutely. Julia, any final thoughts about Jaws?
Oh, gosh, just such a great movie. And I've really enjoyed talking about it. It's taken my mind off of the Robin Williams situation, which he's my favorite actor of all time. So I've been really bummed out about that. And I just wanted to kind of say a little, you know, just give a quote. One of the quotes I've seen going around is something he said, you're only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it. So I love that quote. I thought I'd throw it in here since I think we all have a little spark of madness, I hope. So this has been really nice to, you know, just take this break and revel in Shark Week a little bit and have some fun.
Excellent. Wonderful. And thank you for the comment on the Williams situation. I guess that leaves it to me. I have really literally nothing else to add. This is other than I'll add something else, which is that there's just so much here. I never get tired of watching Jaws. Next week we're going to talk about Jaws 2, and it'll give us a chance really not just to talk about Jaws 2, but to reapproach from another angle what was so great about Jaws the first. So you can't not see this movie. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things also. I mean, one of my friends, Eric, who, you know, goes by Quint on Ain't It Cool News, like, I'm afraid of doing this movie because he's such a good fan. He's actually talked to Spielberg and everything. Like, you know, when I started wanting to do when we wanted to do this episode, I was like, oh man, if Quint listens to this, like, we're gonna do it justice. Like, it's one of those movies where you want to like I said, we could do like 3 episodes easily and still just.
Well, I hope that if Quint is listening, that he'll post on our Facebook and tell us neat things that he knows that maybe we've missed.
Yeah, he's done some great interviews. Like, in fact, that's probably one of my endorsements. I'd have to look him up. I'll post him, but he did great interview stuff, and he's a really great writer too. So, really good guy.
I have to tell you, the movie did make me. It absolutely made me afraid. You know, that of going swimming in the ocean. That you know, because it's, you know, you can't see what's below the water. You can't see. You don't know. Something could come up and and bite your toes, right away. And somebody in the chat room is saying, that they were afraid of swimming even in freshwater lakes because they were too young to know the difference. And I should point out that in parts of Nicaragua, they actually have freshwater sharks. So you would have been exactly right. So leaving you with that, why don't we come around and run for endorsements? Tony, do you have anything for us?
I'm trying to think. I mean, definitely the Blu-ray, just because it's really fantastic. Man, I can't think of anything right offhand right now, but definitely get the Blu-ray or borrow it or however you can see it. It's pretty cheap now, the newest one, and watch all the features because there's some really great stuff that definitely reinforces what you've seen on the screen. Most people probably already have it. I just, didn't for whatever reason. I think I was just mad because I couldn't get the Best Buy, book version, and I wanted it so bad because I'm like, the book version is going to be the best, and then I didn't get it, and I was just like, oh, well, fine, I'll get it some other time, sour grapes, but I do wish I had that now.
I did have a wonderful, enormous coffee table book about the making of Jaws, and I think I sold it during one of the moves, so it makes me so sad. But, Drew, did you have any endorsements for us?
Well, first off, I want to endorse Duel, which is Spielberg, a TV movie that Spielberg did. And he always calls Jaws a sort of spiritual sequel to that. Jaws is a monster movie where the monster is a shark. Duel is a movie where the monster is a giant truck.
Yes.
And if you have not seen it, it's a different side of Spielberg. It kind of visually has a lot in common with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to me. It's got that sort of grit to it. And so it's not like the fully formed Spielberg style while still having a lot of the Spielberg touches. And it's just a great movie, and it's not as revisited as many of Spielberg's genre pictures, of which there are, now. He was the Hollywood's premier fantasist for nearly two decades. But great movie, and if you can get your hands on it, please check it out. But I also selfishly want to point out that the new issue of Rue Morgue, that's issue 147, it has the crow on the cover, has a feature this month about Halloween Man, which is crazy because I spent a good portion of my 20s reading Rue Morgue magazine. It was, at that point, it was kind of the upstart horror magazine. It wasn't Famous Monsters, it wasn't Fangoria. To see my comic featured in this magazine is amazing, and they say really, really nice things about it. They call it contagiously fun, and it also says, meet the superhero who really takes a bite out of crime, which I can't believe I didn't think of on my own. But, it's an awesome issue in of itself. It's got features on The Crow. It's got features on Motel Hell, Phantom of the Paradise, Legend of Hell House. It's a good issue. So if you just want to pick up a good horror magazine, you can pick it up. But again, I am flabbergasted and honored and just crazily happy that this has come to pass because again I spent certainly a good amount of quality time with this magazine back in the day.
That's solid, man. Congrats.
That is totally awesome.
Well, thank you.
Very, very cool. Gosh, does that leave me?
Julia.
Okay, Julia. Oh, thank you.
I would like to recommend the new television show Extant with Halle Berry. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's on its 5th episode. It's really cool. She's an astronaut who goes on a 13-month solo space mission and comes back pregnant. So there's all that, and then it's a lot of fun. And Goran Visnik from ER fame is in it, who I always adored, as her husband, and just it's got a lot of actually familiar folks in the movie. But the TV show. It's like a movie, but it's a lot of fun, and check it out.
Very cool. Thank you, Julia. My thoughts are, I have two that I'd like to throw out there. One is Robin and Marion. I think it'd be really interesting for people to watch Jaws and then watch Robin and Marion because they're movies that are released, very, very close together. And Robert Shaw plays very important supporting roles in both of those. And in Robin and Marion, it's about Sean Connery plays Robin Hood coming out of retirement back from the Crusades, and he returns, and the Sheriff of Nottingham is more or less taken over, and Robin has to sort of step into his old role and challenge the sheriff. And they're both much older men, and it's really an amazing performance from both of them. There's a point where Robert Shaw and Sean Connery decide that rather than risk the lives of both their armies, which would be catastrophic, they're just going to beat the crap out of one another, to the death. And it's this grueling, long, just battle between them. And it's so amazing to see Shaw, who here is the gap-toothed, slovenly Quint. There is the elegant and very brutal Sheriff of Nottingham. Great stuff. Robin and Marion, 1976. So you got to check that out. Also, Robin Williams, who passed away this week, was a guest on the show WTF, which is hosted by Mark Maron, who is a comedian who knew Robin Williams a little bit, and they shared a lot in common and a lot of the same tracks as stand-up comics. So there's this long, like hour-long or more conversation that Robin Williams had 4 years ago in 2010 with Mark Maron. When Robin Williams' death was announced yesterday, Mark Maron pulled the episode out. He added a new introduction just yesterday, put the episode back up. It's free, and it's very interesting to hear Robin Williams talk about the challenges of being a stand-up comic, about alcoholism and ways you can lie to yourself when you start drinking again, and just all kinds of really amazing, more in-depth conversation than you ever hear from any comedian, much less one this important. It was recorded in Robin Williams' old home, like I say, in 2010, and it's fantastic. And by the way, that show in general is fantastic. That's a great episode. So just go to WTF, I think it's WTFpod.com, and it's the new episode. Let me confirm that. Yeah, and it's which is what the fuck, WTF with Mark Maron. So WTFpod.com, and this week, just right on the front says Remembering Robin Williams, and it's a link to this fantastic interview. Just one of the best I've ever heard. So that's my only endorsement. We will be back next week from the sublime to the ridiculous. We're going to discuss Jaws 2 as we finish our retrospective of Jaws movies that starred Roy Scheider. And Jaws 2 is going to be, I think, a very educational movie for us to discuss. I am so thrilled that you guys are here. I hope that you will leave comments for us on Facebook and argue with us and challenge all of our crazy notions, and leave reviews on iTunes and invite your friends to subscribe to us. And thanks once again to Tony for hosting for the past 6 weeks. Joy and I are really happy to be back.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Night.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.